Welcome to the North Sessions. Settle in and let every story carry you towards sleep. I'm Lewis, and tonight I'll be reading for you. Tonight we follow Odysseus, resting on the open deck of his ship, somewhere between one island and the next, under a sky so full of stars it seems to lean gently down toward the water. Beneath these words, you'll hear the quiet sound of the sea against the hull, water moving easy beneath old wood, and you can let that sound be the only thing that matters for a moment. When you're ready, find a comfortable position and let the story come to you. Notice now where your body is resting. Feel the surface beneath you holding your full weight, steady and still. Let your shoulders drop just a little away from your ears. Your hands can be open or closed, whichever feels natural. Soften the muscles around your eyes, around your jaw, and feel your breath moving in and out at its own pace, without any effort from you at all. With each breath out, your chest grows a little heavier, a little quieter. Your legs can stop working now. Your feet can let go. There is nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to be, and nothing waiting for your attention tonight. The sound of the sea is already there beneath everything, carrying the quiet forward. You are here, you are warm, and the story is ready to begin whenever your eyes are ready to close. The spare sail had been folded unevenly since the last port, its corners gathered in a rough bundle near the mast and left there by whoever had stowed it in a hurry. Odysseus noticed it the way he always noticed such things, not with irritation, but with a quiet, settled recognition that it needed attending to. He moved toward the mast on bare feet, the deck planks warm still from the day's sun, holding a last faint trace of heat against his soles. The ship rocked in its easy rhythm, the kind of motion that belonged entirely to calm water, a long and breathing rise and fall with no urgency behind it. He crouched beside the bundle and drew the sail toward him, finding the nearest corner by touch. The linen was thick and a little stiff, carrying the faint saltandrope smell that every sail took on after weeks at sea. It was not an unpleasant smell. It was simply the smell of being far from shore, of open water and air that had traveled a long distance before reaching the ship. He set the corner flat against the deck and smoothed it with one hand, working from the center outward toward the hem. The weave pressed firm, and even under his fingers, the threads close and well made, the kind of work that held its shape even after days of sun and spray. He folded the corner in, edge to edge, pressing the crease down gently. The process moved at its own pace, fold after fold, each one laid over the last with an easy care. It was a little like stacking stones beside a path, a thing done not because it was urgent, but because doing it well was a form of quiet attention that the hands understood without needing instruction from the mind. Somewhere near the stern, one of the crew shifted in his sleep, turning onto his side with a low sound that was not quite a word. The movement settled almost immediately, and the ship went back to its steady quiet, the sail creaking once above in the light wind. Odysseus turned the bundle and found the opposite corner, drawing it in and aligning it with the first. His movements made almost no sound, just the soft brush of linen over weathered wood, a dry and gentle whisper that went nowhere and did not carry. The stars above him had not moved in any way he could measure, though he knew they were always moving, tracing their long arcs across the dark. He looked up for a moment between folds, simply because the sky was there, and it was worth looking at. Then he looked back down, smoothed the next crease flat, and kept on. The sail was done. He set it against the base of the mast with both hands, positioning it with a gentle care so that it would not shift in the night, and then he straightened and stood. His back felt the straightening, a long, deep awareness running from his shoulders down through his spine, not pain exactly, more like a held breath finally let go. He rolled his shoulders once slowly, feeling the pull across the top of his chest and down his arms. It was a good feeling, the kind that came after work done quietly and with attention. He moved a few steps away from the mast and sat down against the low rail at the side of the ship, letting his legs stretch out in front of him on the deck planks. The wood was still holding some of the day's warmth, though it was cooler now than before, the surface carrying a faint dampness from the evening air. He pressed his palms flat against the deck on either side of him and felt that coolness against his skin, easy and pleasant in the dark. Above him, the sail shifted once, a soft sound, like a page turning in a room where someone is almost asleep. The wind was barely enough to move it, just a steady breath from the south that came and went without making much of itself. He tilted his head back and let it rest against the rail. The stretch moved through his neck, then eased, and he stayed there a moment with his face turned up toward the sky. The stars were many and close-looking, the way they always appeared on open water far from any shore, with nothing nearby to diminish them. He did not try to name them or trace their patterns. He simply let them be there, the way you let a sound in another room be there without needing to know what made it. His breathing had settled into something long and even, his chest rising gently and falling again without any effort he could feel. The water moved under the ship in its familiar way, a quiet and rhythmic lift and return that had been going on since they left port and would go on until they reached wherever they were going. Near the center of the deck, one of the older crew members, a broad man named Pyramids who usually slept with one arm folded under his head, had shifted in his sleep. His breathing, steady and low, carried across the quiet without disturbing it. Odysseus did not look at him. He only heard the sound and felt the ship around him, the wood and rope and canvas all working together at their own gentle pace. Holding the night the way a cupped hand holds water, with an easy and unthinking steadiness. The air had shifted while he sat there, not colder exactly, but thinner somehow. The way air gets in the hours well past midnight, when the last of the day's warmth has finally finished rising from the earth and the sea. He felt it first along the back of his arms, a quiet awareness, like the feeling of stepping from one room into another where a window has been left open. He reached for the cloak beside him without sitting up, his fingers finding it by feel alone, the rough-woven wool slightly stiff with salt from the days behind them. He drew it up and across his shoulders, settling it around him with a single, unhurried motion. The fabric settled against the back of his neck, and he adjusted one edge so it lay flat rather than folded, pressing it gently down with his fingers. The wool was heavier than it looked. It carried a smell that was familiar to him now, brine and something darker underneath, wood smoke perhaps from evenings before they put out to sea. He did not mind it. It was the smell of belonging somewhere, even if that somewhere was moving, even if it had no walls. He pulled the front of the cloak across his chest and tucked the edge loosely beneath his arm, not to pin it, just to keep it from falling open again if the wind picked up. The gesture took a moment. His fingers moved unhurried, finding the fabric, folding it back on itself in a small, neat way he had done so many times before that his hands knew it without instruction. From somewhere near the stern, pyramids shifted again in his sleep. A low sound, half a breath, half something else, and then nothing. The quiet came back the way water fills a shape, easy and without announcement. Odysseus settled back against the rail and let the cloak hold its warmth against him. It was not much, a simple thing, cloth and a bit of care. But there was something in it that felt good all the same, the small act of making yourself comfortable in the middle of a large and open world. The sail moved once above him, a long, slow lean to one side and back, the rigging giving a single low note that passed through the wood of the ship and into the deck beneath him. He felt it in his spine more than heard it. The stars sat where they were, steady and without comment, the same stars that had been there all evening, taking no notice of the ship or the man sitting quiet beneath them. He let his eyes go soft. Not closed, not yet, just easy, the kind of looking that is almost not looking at all. The wood was smooth in some places and rough in others, and his fingers found the difference without looking for it. He had let his hand fall from the cloak to the rail beside him, not reaching for anything, not checking anything, just resting. And then, the way the hands do when the mind is quiet and the body has nothing pressing to do, his fingers began to move. Not back and forth, but along the grain of the wood, following the long lines that ran beneath the surface like the memory of what the timber used to be. The grain rose in small ridges in some places, worn down to almost nothing in others where hands and rope and weather had passed over the same stretch of wood too many times to count. He traced one line with his thumb, pressing gently, feeling where it curved and where it ran straight. It forked at one point into two thinner lines that slowly spread apart, the way a river divides around a long, flat island, each branch going its own way without hurry. There was salt in the grain. He could feel it as a faint roughness, not grit exactly, more like the texture of something that had dried many times and been dried again. The wood absorbing the sea over days and weeks until the two things had become harder to separate. He pressed the pad of his finger along one ridge and held it there a moment. The rail was cool against his palm where it lay flat, cooler than the cloak, cooler than the air around him. A steady kind of cool, not sharp, the way stone is cool in a room that has been out of the sun for a long time. He thought, without quite meaning to, about the tree this wood had been. Somewhere on a hillside, he imagined, in a place with shade and ordinary soil, before someone had looked at it and seen a ship. There was something quiet in that thought. Not sad, just distant, the way certain thoughts arrive in the night that feel too large to hold, and so you let them drift past without gripping them. His fingers moved on, finding a small raised knot set just below the top edge of the rail, a dense circle of compressed wood that pushed up firm and round under his thumb. He pressed it once, the way you press a smooth stone you have found on a beach, just to feel that it is there. From nearby, the even sound of 𝐒𝐓𝐿𝐿 breathing in his sleep shifted for a moment, deepened, and then found its rhythm again. The water moved beneath the hull in its quiet, taking its own time. Odysseus let his hand rest. The grain of the rail lay still beneath his palm. The cloak had shifted while he lay there. He noticed it first as a coolness at his left shoulder, where the wool had pulled away and left the linen beneath open to the night air. Not uncomfortable, not sharp. Just present, the way a small thing makes itself known when the body has grown still enough to find it. He reached up with one hand and caught the edge of the cloak between his fingers. The wool was thick there, bunched slightly where it had gathered in the pull of its own weight. He drew it back across his shoulder without lifting his head from the rail, guiding the cloth back into place in one long, even sweep. The wool was dense under his fingers. It carried warmth from where it had been resting against him, a warmth that was already his own, stored in the weave and given back now as he spread it evenly over both shoulders. Not the warmth of a fire, nothing active in it. More like the warmth a stone holds after a long afternoon, quiet and deep and going nowhere. He smoothed the edge of the cloak with the back of his hand, running it along the fold where the cloth met his collarbone. The wool caught faintly against his skin, not unpleasant. Just the soft drag of something woven tightly, fibers that had pressed and released and pressed again across many nights. The weight of the cloak settled back into place, even across both shoulders now, even down the chest, the hem lying somewhere near his shins where he could feel the edge of it without looking. He took a breath and felt the cloth rise with him and fall. From the far side of the deck, one of the oarsmen turned in his sleep, and the sound of it was small and brief, a shift of cloth and a long exhale, and then nothing more. The ship went on around them all, easy on the water. Odysseus let his hand drop back to his side. He did not think about the cloak anymore. It was there, and it was enough, and his mind moved on without effort to nothing in particular. The stars above him were where they had been. The sail held what little air was moving, taking it without resistance. He felt the weight of the wool, steady now, the same on both sides. His eyes were already closing before he noticed they were. The cold had settled in while he rested. He became aware of it gradually, the way cold finds you when you stop moving against it. Not bitter, not sharp at the edges, just there, the way the night air off open water knows how to find the skin and rest against it without asking. He breathed in through his nose. The air came cool and clean, carrying something of the sea in it, something of distance and dark water, and the particular emptiness that lives between one island and the next. He held it a moment, calm, without thought. Then he let it go. The breath left him in a slow, even release, and where it met the cold air above his face, it bloomed softly into something he could see, even in the low light. A pale shape, brief and quiet, like the ghost of a word no one had said. It rose a little, then spread, then was gone, drawn apart by the mild movement of the air. He watched it go. There was nothing particular in the watching. It was only the way the eye follows a thing when the mind has set everything else down. He breathed again. The breath came, and again when it left him it made that small pale shape above his face. He noticed the way it curled at the edges before it thinned. He did not hold onto the noticing. It passed through him the way warmth passes from a stone, without hurry, without remainder. The wool of the cloak lay across his chest. He felt it rise as he breathed in, felt it fall as he breathed out. Rise. Fall. The rhythm of it was its own kind of company. From somewhere to his left, 𝐒𝐓𝐻𝐿 shifted again in his sleep. A small sound, no more than a breath of his own released into the dark. The deck held him where he lay. Odysseus did not turn his head. He only heard it, registered it the way you register a sound that belongs, and then let it pass back into the general quiet of the ship. He breathed out again. The pale shape rose and spread and dissolved. The stars sat where they had been all night. The water moved beneath the hull in its easy, untroubled way, and the wood took it, and the ship went on. His eyes were not quite closed, not quite open. The line between those two things had grown gentle. The breath kept coming, steady and low, each one a little less considered than the last, each one giving a little more back to the body that had earned the rest. The cold was still there, but his own warmth was there too, stored in the wool pressed against his chest. And the two of them had made a kind of agreement, a quiet one, the kind that asks nothing and holds easily all through the night. The sail moved. It was a small thing, a gather of canvas at the lower edge, a soft collapse inward. Then a breath of air found it and pressed it back out again into its old shape. Odysseus heard it before he saw it. A low sound, almost nothing. The way a page might turn in another room, in a house where someone else is settling in for the night. He did not lift his head. He only let his eyes move that way, easy, across the deck and upward. The sail hung in the dark above him, pale against the sky. For a moment it had gone slack, its belly gone soft, the fabric folding gently into itself like something resting. And then the air came, quiet and steady off the open water, and the sail gathered it and filled, taking the shape back the way a slow breath fills a chest. It held there. The rigging took a small sound from it, a single low note from somewhere up the mast, not sharp. More like the string of an instrument touched once, by accident, in a quiet room. Then the sail settled. It did not move again. It stood in the dark, full and still, holding what it had been given, and the ship leaned into it without effort. Odysseus felt the lean. A long, gentle press through the wood at his back, the whole ship taking a soft angle, then holding it, then carrying them along it without complaint. He thought of nothing in particular, only the lean of it, the way a body shifts its weight in sleep without waking. The ship doing the same thing in its way. His breathing had not changed. In through the nose, out through the mouth, easy and low. The cloak rose and fell across his chest. Above him, the sail stayed full. The stars did not move. The water came against the hull in its unvarying way, and the hull gave back only its steady, low sound, the same it had been making for hours, the same it would make until morning. 𝐒𝐓𝐻𝐿 breathed in the dark to his left, still folded into whatever sleep had him. Odysseus let his eyes go where they wanted, which was nowhere. The line between watching and not watching had grown soft. The sail was there. The stars were there. The water was doing what water does, without him, without needing anything from him at all. He breathed out. The pale shape rose above his face and spread and was gone. The ship went on. The cloak had shifted in the night. not by much. An inch, maybe less. The edge of it had drawn away from his left shoulder while he lay there, and the air off the water found the gap and settled against his skin, cool and without judgment. He felt it the way you feel a change in a room when someone quietly opens a door somewhere else in the house. Odysseus reached up. His hand found the edge of the wool almost before he was aware of reaching for it. He drew it back across. That was all. The fabric came easily, still heavy with warmth from the hours he had been lying there. He pulled it over his shoulder and tucked the edge down against his side, and the cool air was gone. The wool was soft against his neck now, worn soft, the way old things go, through years of the same hands. He let his arm rest again. The deck held him the way it had been holding him. The low sound of the water came against the hull. The rigging was quiet. 𝐒𝐓𝐻𝐿 breathed on in the dark to his left, unhurried, unchanged. Odysseus could feel the cloak now all the way across, the weight of it, the warmth of it coming back from every place it touched, like something returning to where it had always been. He did not think about the shore. He did not think about the morning. He thought very briefly about the cloak itself, about how long it had been with him, how many nights. Then he did not think about that either. The sail stood above him, full and still. The stars were where they had been. The water moved under the hull in its steady, easy way. The hull answered. The ship went on. His breathing was low, in and out. The cloak rose with it and fell with it and held its warmth all the way to the edges. The sky was dark. It was very dark and very wide and very quiet. He was warm. The wool settled around him. He was warm, and the deck was steady, and the water went on in its quiet way against the hull. Then, without deciding to, he moved. Not much. His shoulder had been resting against the same plank for a long while, and some part of him, beneath thought, asked for a small change. He let it. He rolled his weight to the right, unhurried, and the deck received him in the new position without complaint. The planks were smooth there, worn smooth by years of feet and rope and weather and salt. He could feel the grain of the wood through his cloak, faint and even like the texture of something very old and very patient. He settled. His hip found the deck. His shoulder found the deck. The cloak came with him, still warm, still heavy, rearranging itself around his new shape, the way water finds the floor of a vessel. He breathed out slowly. 𝐒𝐓𝐻𝐿 was still breathing in the dark to his left. In, out, the same rhythm he had been keeping for hours, unchanged by the small movement, unaware of it. Odysseus lay in the new position and let it become familiar. The ship's sound came up through the planks from below, that low, untroubled creak. It had been there all night. It would be there when morning came. He felt it more clearly now, through his hip, through his shoulder, the way you feel a sound differently when you change where you are in a room. The sail was still above him. He could see it without looking for it. The stars were still there. The sky was still wide and dark, and full of the same deep quiet it had been carrying all night. He felt the cloak across his chest, the weight of it, the warmth coming back from every place it touched. His shoulder was comfortable now. The small thing that had asked for a change was settled. He breathed in, he breathed out. The water came against the hull. The hull gave back its gentle answer. The ship went on. He did not think about the morning. He did not think about anything much at all. The new position held him the same way the old one had, steady and without asking anything of him. His eyes were soft. The sail was pale above him. The dark was everywhere else. The water went on. The cloak had shifted, not far, just a little at the shoulder. The weight of it had gathered to one side during the rolling, pulling the fabric slightly away from where it had rested before. He felt it, the small coolness where the wool had moved. His hand found the edge of the fabric near his collar without needing to search for it. His fingers closed on it. The wool was dense and a little rough at the edge, the kind of roughness that had been there so long it had become soft in its own way. He drew it back, just an inch or two. Enough. The wool came over his shoulder and settled against the deck beneath him, tucking in the way a tide fills a quiet cove without force, without sound. He let go of it. His hand went back beneath the cloak. The warmth was there waiting for it. The shoulder was covered now. He could feel the weight of the fabric resting across it again, the same as it had been before. He did not need to think about it anymore. 𝐒𝐓𝐻𝐃 breathed in the dark to his left, in and out, steady and unhurried, the way it had been all through the night. The ship went on beneath him. That low creak came up through the planks, felt more than heard. It was the same sound it had always been. He had stopped noticing it the way you stop noticing something that has always been there. The sail hung above him. The stars were in the sky. The water was against the hull. He breathed out, and the cloak rose with it and fell. His shoulder was warm. His eyes were soft, and the dark was wide and quiet above him. The ship moved on the water, easy and taking its time, going where it was going. He was still. The cloak was where it needed to be. He breathed in. He breathed out. The water went on. The stars held their places in the dark. The water moved the way it had been moving for hours, finding the hull and leaving it, finding it again. Odysseus lay on the deck among the sleeping crew, the cloak across him, his breathing steady and his eyes no longer quite open. The sky was the same sky it had always been, wide and deep, and full of the kind of quiet that asks nothing of anyone beneath it. The ship drifted on the open water, going where it was going. The stars were still there, patient as they had been since the very first night of the crossing. The water went on. The ship carried them on through the dark, patient and unhurried, the way it had carried them every night before this one. There is nowhere else you need to be now. Nothing left to attend to, nothing left to hold. Let the sound of the water stay with you, steady and low, for as long as you need it. And when your mind is ready, let it drift the rest of the way, out past the stars, out past the ship, into a sleep as deep and as easy as the sea itself. Sleep well.